Mishnah Tes of the first parak of Shabbos says as follows. Omer Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Noyagin hoyu beis abba. My father's household had the minhag. Shahoyu noisnin klilavon la koves nachru. They would give white clothes, which were particularly difficult to clean, lenachru, la koves nachru, to a Gentile dry cleaner, a Gentile launderer. Shloisha yomim kodim Shabbos, 3 whole days before Shabbos. Why? Because it would take 3 whole days to clean these items, and therefore Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and his household were noyeg like Beis Shammai, that you can only give items, like we mentioned in the previous Mishnah, to a Gentile koves, to a Gentile launderer before Shabbos, if he had enough time to do it before Shabbos. So therefore, since these levanim, since these white articles of clothing, which were very hard to clean, needed a full 3 days to clean them, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would only give them to the launderer before Shabbos. Now I assume that there's a machlokes generally in other areas of Hilchos Shabbos what the 3 days are. For example, you shouldn't set sail on a boat 3 days before Shabbos. From memory, there's a machlokes, the Magen Avraham and the Gra, whether those 3 days are Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, or whether it's Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos, whether we include Shabbos or not. So perhaps, but here it seems that the 3 days has got to be before Shabbos, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because he needed a full 3 days before the actual laundering took place. However, Beis Hillel wouldn't need it. As long as you give it before Shkias HaChama, you're okay. The difficulty which the Mefarshim and others explain is how could Rav Shimon Gamliel be noiheg like Beis Shammai? There are many Makoros which say you're not allowed to be noiheg like Beis Shammai. If the halach is like Beis Hillel, to adopt a practice, even if it's being machmir like Beis Shammai, is wrong. So Mefarshim ask, how could it be that Rav Shimon Gamliel was noiheg like Beis Shammai? The halach is like Beis Hillel. So how could he and his household be noiheg like Beis Shammai? And indeed, the Mishnah in Brachos, Mishnah Perek Aleph, Mishnah Hey, criticizes Reb Tarfon. Why? Because there is a machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel vis-a-vis Kriya. So it says b'shach b'chov kumecha. So the Mishnah says there that Beis Shammai are of the view that when it says b'shach b'chov, it means that in the night Shema one must lie down, and in the morning Shema that we say in the morning you've got to stand up. And therefore, when Rabbi Tarfon wanted to lie down for Kriya Shema at night time, the Chacham were very upset with him because he was being noig like Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel interpret the pasuk differently, and they say it has nothing to do with the position in which you say the Shema, lying down, standing up, but rather b'shach b'chov kumecha means the time when you do it. B'shach b'chov, when people go to bed, there's a chiyuv to say Shema at night time. Of kumecha, and in the morning, there's a chiyuv to say Shema, Kriya Shema at night, Kriya Shema in the morning. So we see that someone who adopts the practice of Beis Shammai is treated very seriously in the eyes of Chazal. So how could Rav Shimon Gamliel in our case be noheg like Beis Shammai? That is what many of the Farshim discuss. So there are different shirutzim, but one mahalach that I saw in the Tosfos Yontov in the name of the Rosh is as follows. There are 2 types of machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. The first type of machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is where Beis Shammai are machmir and they're strict in a certain respect, and Beis Hillel say, look, you don't need to be so strict. The halach is more lenient. If you want to be noheg like that, that's fine. For example, the Mishnah says, when it comes to Birchas Hamazon, if you forget Birchas Hamazon, it's the Mishnah in Berachos Perek Ches Mishnah Zayin, that if you forget Birchas Hamazon, Beis Shammai say you should go back to the place where you ate and say Birchas Hamazon there. Beis Hillel say it's not necessary. For Birchas Hamazon, you're allowed to say Birchas Hamazon wherever you are. Maybe you've moved on, and you don't have to go back to the place where you ate. Machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. We passing like Beis Hillel. However, the Gemara there tells a story that a person wanted to comply with the viewpoint of Beis Shammai, and he ate a suda, and he carried on his journey, and then he remembered that he hadn't benched. So he was nohig like Beis Shammai, and he went back to the place where he ate. He was more machmir. Beis Hillel wouldn't need him to go back. They would allow him to bench wherever he remembered. But he was nohig like Beis Shammai, he was machmir, and he went back to the place where he ate and he benched there. The Gemara says that he was rewarded with a bag of coins, so he was rewarded. So how do we square the two? So the Tosfos Yontov says an interesting pshat. In a situation where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue, but Beis Shammai are just more machmir, and Beis Hillel are moided, they're more machmir, but we don't need to be machmir like that, then if someone wants to take on the viewpoint of Beis Shammai, that's fine. But in and that's what the case of the Berachas Ozim was. But in a second type of machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing, it's not a case of one being more machmin than the other. For example, in the case of Reb Tarfon, of B'shach b'chov kumecha, Beis Hillel argue with the very pshat of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai say B'shach b'chov means that you rest, you lie down, you recline when you say Kriya Shema at night, and you stand up when you say Kriya Shema in the morning. Beis Hillel say, no, that's not pshat. Beis Hillel say, B'shach b'chov kumecha refers to the time of day when you say it. That's why Reb Tarfon was so much criticized over there. And therefore, in our case, when Reb Shimon Gamliel was, and him, and Noagin Hoy Beis Abo, Shenoistin Kli Lovin Lokoves for 3 days, that is an example of the first type of machlokas. Where Beis Shammai are more machmir, they want you to do the whole thing before Shabbos. And Beis Hillel say, no, it's not necessary. But if you want to be noiheg like Beis Shammai, that's okay. That's how the Tosfos Yontif explains this case. But either way, Reb Shimon Gamliel was noiheg to do this for 3 days before Shabbos, but Beis Hillel wouldn't have deemed that necessary. Continues the Mishnah, V'shavin elu ve'elu shetoyanin koireis Beis Habad v'igulei hagas. Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree, shetoyanin koireis Beis Habad, that you can place the beams of the olive press on top of the olives, v'igulei hagas, and the rollers, also types of beams, onto the wine press on top of the grapes. One can do that on Shabbos. What is this about? The background to this is that there are two ways, two stages in the process of pressing olives and pressing grapes. When you press olives, the first stage of pressing olives is that you press the actual olives themselves and the majority of the oil comes out. Then, a secondary stage is that you take the squashed olives and you put them under a beam, and then the remainder of the oil will ooze out. Similarly with grapes as well, you press them, you actually tread on them, and the majority of the grape juice comes out. And then the remaining grape skins and the bits left, you put them under the press, and then the remaining juice comes out. Now, the Mishnah says that both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that you're allowed to do this second stage of placing the remnants of the olive and of the grapes under the press on Shabbos. Even Beis Shammai would agree. And so it comes out that we've got a much clearer ged there, a much clearer parameter as to what Beis Shammai say. When Beis Shammai say that you're not allowed to begin a melacha before Shabbos for a melacha that continues over Shabbos, that's only talking about a chi of deraisa. Why? Because the Bar Tanura says as follows. The Bar Tanura says, towards the end of this Mishnah, Ubaha moidu Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel. In this respect, Beis Shammai agreed to Beis Hillel. Mishum de'inami oved lehu b'Shabbos. Even if you were to do this activity, this pressing on Shabbos, lek a chi of chatas. There's no deraisa for that. Because the primary stage, the first stage, is to squash them in the rechaim, in a mill, in a grinding way, and then you get rid of the majority of the oil. You squash them with your feet first. Now, even if you weren't to do this pressing, this secondary pressing with the beams, the juice is going to come out anyway. But it just comes out much quicker if you do it with the beams. Therefore, it's not similar to dosh. Therefore, the reason why Beis Shammai agreed to Beis Hillel over here is because it's only a derabbanon. Because the primary melacha of dosh has happened already. What happens over here is that it's going to come out anyway now. So therefore, you putting it on top of the beams is just speeding it up, and therefore it's not considered a deraisa. Therefore, it comes out that when the previous Mishnayos, when Beis Shammai give the rule that a melacha which may not be begun before Shabbos, if it's allowed to continue over Shabbos, that's only for a deraisa. But if the issa itself is a derabbanon, then even Beis Shammai would agree that to begin that melacha derabbanon before Shabbos and allow it to continue on Shabbos, that would be mutter. That's what the Mishnah means. V'shavin elu ve'elu, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree. Shetan encourages Beis Habad v'igulei hagas, that you can begin this process and let it continue over Shabbos because we're talking about a melacha derabbanon. That's the end of Mishnah Tes.